Hey YouTube folks, welcome to another video on this chess channel. And in today's video, yes, we're going to see for sure one of the craziest games in the history of chess. This game was played in 1990 for the World Championship, and the players competing for the title were the Russians, Garry Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov. This game is of unimaginable complexity. We're going to see at least a little bit of the great genius of these players. Well, this game is also very well known because there's a video here on YouTube where Kasparov analyzes his moves and the variations together with the reporter. In fact, that video will play in our video here. And the analysis I'm going to bring you is exactly the analysis of the former world champion himself, Garry Kasparov. So hold on to your seat, get your popcorn ready, and let's get to this insane match now. So guys, here we are, and playing white was Garry Kasparov against Anatoly Karpov. And Kasparov starts the game here with it. Equatrino, Bob Fischer's favorite. And in the 1990 World Championship, one of the most used openings was the Ruy Lopez, and it was no different in this game. Karpov chooses to play here with e5, then comes knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5, and a6. And they're playing the famous Spanish opening. In this position, Kasparov chooses to play the closed Ruy Lopez with the move bishop to a4. Karpov continues developing his pieces by playing knight to f6, then castling to protect the king, bishop to e7, rook to e1, giving more support now to the e4 pawn. Here comes the move b5. Oops, the bishop is threatened, so it goes back to b3, d6, and in this position, Kasparov makes a very thematic move for those who play the Ruy Lopez as white, which is c3, freeing up the c2 square in case moves like knight to a5 come so as not to lose the pair of bishops. In this position, Karpov also protects his king by castling and then her3, controlling the g4 square. And this is a very important moment in this type of position because basically there are three main plans for black here. What are they? The move knight to a5, which brings the idea of threatening to win white's pair of bishops. But the trickier idea is to play c5 next, gaining space on the queen side and contact in the center. Another very common plan is to play knight to b8, which brings the same idea of playing with c5. Or the move that Karpov chose, which was bishop to b7, which brings an indirect idea of starting to put pressure on the e4 pawn from a distance. That was the move played in the game. Kasparov plays now. The move d4 fights for the center, while rook to e8 and bishop to b7 both aim to bring the bishop back to f8. Look, the bishop, knight, and rook are watching over there. On the pawn at e4, development continues. nb1d2, bf8, and a 4 Kasparov seeks action on the queen side. Karpov plays h6. The defensive move controls the g5 square, pressuring f7. We're reaching the moment of insane calculation. Kasparov plays bishop 2, then the e4 pawn is captured, c takes d4, Karpov plays knight b4 to break the white bishop pair. Kasparov declines with bishop 1, then e5 gaining queenside space and center contact. Then comes d5 played by Kasparov. Knight d7, which brings the idea of playing f5, pushing the pawn, right? Since the knight blocked that pawn's advance. And rook 3 is Kasparov's move, a very interesting move, bringing the rook over the third rank, which will make perfect sense in the next moves, right? Karpov played f5 re3 and then nf6, pressuring the e4 square heavily. Knight 2 played by Kasparov, starting the evil plan, and king 8 followed by the move b3, very interesting, which brings the idea of playing bishop 2. And wow, look at the power of these bishop pairs here, aiming at the black king. The pawn on a4 is captured. B takes a4, followed by the clever move c4 by Karpov. The idea behind this move is that if Kasparov captures the pawn on c4, the knight stops defending the e4 square, and Karpov wants to start destroying the center. But at this moment, Kasparov plays a very interesting developing move here, which is bishop to b2. Kasparov's idea is to attack, so he's aiming the bishops at the black king. The game continues now with the capture of the pawn on e4. Knight takes e4, and the knight from f goes to d5. In this position, Kasparov has lost a pawn. He sacrificed a pawn in search of an unbelievable attack that's about to happen. Rook to g3 was played by Kasparov, rook to e6, and now comes the move knight to g4 in this position. Karpov plays queen to e8, and we've reached the most critical moment of this game. where Karpov is now putting a lot of pressure on the e-file. And the big question is, what move should white play now? Kasparov pulled an unbelievable move out of his hat, given the depth of calculation. It's a brilliant move, he'll even say himself. Look at what a move that was.
No, Karpov's move was incredibly unpleasant.
Queen e8.
He felt that this was a critical mistake. Does the champion show his opinion about this move?
Knight takes h6. So he didn't see this move. I didn't calculate this move. I knew he should win.
He saw you playing this move very quickly over the ball.
It's just so civilized why it's winning, because it's 7 pieces in the attack. 2 bishops, 2 knights, 2 rooks, and the rook is attacking the queen. This is protected, okay, a rook, 2 pawns, and a bishop, and maybe the queen. Okay, we can change. You know, it's an equal exchange. I exchange 1 attacking piece for 1 defensive piece.
But I have enough pieces to... As you saw, in this position, Kasparov played the brilliant move, knight takes h6. And the main point he comments here is the following. All his pieces are very, very active. All the pieces are participating in the game. Both bishops pointing at the black king, the knight in a centralized position, an active rook attacking on g7, the knight on h6, the rook, the queen able to move to the king's side at any moment. A very interesting attacking position. We're about to understand Garry Kasparov's raw calculation. But the lingering question that everyone wants answered is, what happens if black plays rook takes h6? Kasparov will provide the answer.
So let's have a look. Knight takes h6. He played c3, you know. Now,
Why?
didn't he take... okay, if he takes here, it's very nice. And next e6. Now I can show you many good, interesting ways. Number 1, if he's trying to escape with him. If he takes here, then bishop takes this 7-8. This is my... yes. If he takes your queen...
Now then.
Check. As you saw, because of check. And this is spin, the pawn is spun. The king on g8 is mated in several moves, starting with bishop h7, then bishop g6, again, a 7-4 pattern.
Kasparov had it all figured out. If he continued with rook takes h6, he would get a blow in this position, which would be the brilliant and genius knight takes d6. This move is very, very strong, because notice it opens a discovered attack now from the rook on a1 to the queen, all the way on the other side of the board. There are several ways to play this position. The first line Kasparov evaluated here was the move queen to e7, and he suggests here queen to d4, which is a super strong move because notice it attacks the g7. Point very strongly, the bishops are super active, and there are many ways to continue this position. For example, there is the queen exchange, queen takes d6, rook takes d6. Kasparov's first line of analysis is what happens if queen takes d6. In this case, the g7 square is very weak. Kasparov suggests the devastating bishop takes g7 with unstoppable mating lines. For example, bishop takes and mates with queen takes g7, ending the game immediately. Thus, queen takes d6 would be a bad move for black. Another option here is to take with the rook instead of the queen. What happens next? Kasparov showed us, he says here, that queen to h5 would be very strong, where basically black would have 2 possible options, rook to h6 to cover, or the move king to g8. If they play rook to h6, then there's a queen takes h6, and the pawn on g7 is absolutely pinned. White already wins a whole rook here. So this line isn't good either. Another possible suggestion is after the move queen to h5, instead of covering with the rook, to play the move king to g8. But Kasparov shows that here too, there's an unstoppable mating line with bishop to h7, king to h8, bishop to g6, king to g8, and queen to h7. Mates with tomatoes. What a genius, huh? If these lines don't work, how should this position be played? I can't take with the queen. I can't take with the rook. What happens if the game continues with queen takes queen? Kasparov shows us.
Nowadays, it's so clean. If the piece goes out, bishop e6, bishop takes on f5 check, and bishop takes on b7. And then you have a good investment, which is being a rook up.
As you saw, for everything, Kasparov had a concrete calculation, and he said that in this position, if Karpov went with queen, takes g4. Exchanging queens, there's a very concrete and direct winning line for white here, starting with a brilliant and devastating knight on f7. The king can't go to h7 due to the bishop controlling it, so he plays king g8. After knight takes h6, the king takes the knight as he can't go to fe7 or h7. Rook takes g4 and the king is forced to fe7. Kasparov suggests bishop g6, leaving the king with no squares on the e-file or f6. So he goes back to g8, bishop f5 with a discovered check. King f7 is forced, then bishop e6 check, forcing the black king to the e-file. If king e8 bishop takes d5 with a discovered check, and the bishop on b7 falls, and white will be absolutely winning here with a full rook up. So Kasparov realizes here that the line with queen d7, which he was evaluating, doesn't work. And he starts to suggest a new move option here. What happens if he plays queen h5?
You cannot take here because knight f7 check and takes the queen. If you take here, it's interesting, check. Everything that the words had prepared. Bishop was hiding, too threatened, but knight f7 checked suddenly.
Everything Kasparov had prepared in this position. So, as he showed, if Karpov played the move, queen h5 here, Kasparov found a move here that is unbelievably and insanely creative. Absolutely. He suggests here, rook to g5, observe the beauty of this move. The rook is absolutely hanging on the g5 square. He's giving up an entire rook. But, of course, as he showed, you can't take that rook because then comes knight to fe7 check. And I'm taking the queen right after. A terrible fork, right? So here he suggests the line with queen takes d1 exchanging queens. How do you play in this position? Again, a very, very beautiful line here. It's unbelievable that a human being calculated this. He suggests here knight to f7 again. The king doesn't have the h7 square here, right? With the bishop on b1 active, the sequence is kg8, nxh6, kosh8, and finally rxd1. And the main theme of this position is that the pawn on g7 can't take the knight because of the super bishop here on b2. So a very logical and natural suggestion for continuation here is to block this bishop by playing the move c3. And now, a bishop is threatened and a knight is vulnerable. White is bound to lose a piece. But here, Kasparov had an antidote for that, which is unbelievable, which would be the move knight to f7 check. King to g8 is forced. And now, brilliant bishop to g6, and what he saw here is that he's threatening the rook on h5 and mate. Unstoppable right there on the square. At 8 years old, what a chess genius in our history. Here, if you play any move, like taking the bishop, then rook to h5, the idea is unstoppable. Of mate on h8, another option that's possible here. Playing knight to f6 prevents rook to h5, but you can follow up with bishop takes c3, attacking the knight and threatening to capture, gaining a material advantage. For white, the position would still be absolutely winning. So, seeing all this, Kasparov's suggestion here is the queen move. Queen d7 doesn't work, queen h5 doesn't work either, and he shows us what happens if queen takes e1.
Bishop takes g7, bishop takes g7, queen to g4. No defense. The rook can't defend because the queen takes. Queen takes, and that's it. How?
You saw he had everything calculated. And in this position, if Karpov played here, the sacrifice move, queen takes e1, Kasparov suggests here to take with the queen, this capture is forced, rook to d6. Notice here that in this case, Karpov would be trading a queen for a rook. He would be down a knight, losing the exchange. But Kasparov's winning line is forced here. He says queen to e4 here is a real blow, because it threatens mate on h7. And if you cover it, the knight on d3 cuts off the bishop and queen connection, aiming to attack the king. Playing queen to h4 is a very strong move. And here black would have two options. Or cover with the rook to h6, but again, it's the same theme. I have queen takes h6 check, and the pawn on g7 is pinned because of the bishop here on b2. So this move doesn't work anymore, and what happens if you play king to g8? Well, in this case, Kasparov says here that the idea is to completely blow up the black king's defenses by playing bishop takes g7, and it leads to a very curious position here. Why? If bishop takes g7 happens, there's queen to g4, and notice that I'm threatening mate in 1. And the most unbelievable thing here is that black has a lot of pieces on the board, but none of them can satisfactorily defend against the mate on g7. It's unbelievable. For example, the only move that defends the g7 square is rook to d7, but then I have queen takes on d7, and that's it. And that's it. Again, I'm threatening mate in the same way. There's no way to defend. So Kasparov here, he realized that there was no way for black to capture the knight here on h6, and Karpov also calculated all of this concretely. In fact, in this position, he continued playing with c3. He didn't take that knight at all. So how does the fight continue?
He tried to close off this bishop, Fine, but now this bishop has a very strong square. So
First of
all, you gave one piece. Now you're sacrificing another piece. Another piece. Okay, he took this bishop, but this bishop now, he cannot block it anymore.
And he gave you some tempo, which is important in
Chess, yes, absolutely. And I still have 6
pieces. So
6 instead of 7. This is not a big loss. No, there's no opponent, but one defender less, as you said before. So instead of 5, now 4 defenders.
yes, and
It's not enough. Bishop c8 trying to... She goes Kettigate and K2, and there's no defense.
no 5, no 5.
And then Q7.
So here in this position, as you saw Karpov said, no, I'm not going to take anything with the knight on h6, nothing like that. He played the move c3 here, and now he poses some problems for Kasparov. Why? The bishop to d2. The bishop is under threat, and the knight on h6 is also under threat. There's no way to defend both pieces. One of them is going to fall, but here Kasparov played knight to f5, and he's going to show at least a bit of the great refinement, which is amazing in this position, because he says the following. Karpov took his bishop on b2, but here there's a subtle change. In the position, which is the following, when the pawn was on c4, and it moved to the b6 square. When it was on c4, it was defending the bishop here on the diagonal, because black would have the option of knight to d3, limiting the light-squared bishop. And in this position, yes, Kasparov here is down a piece, but he says, my bishop is now active for the rest of the game, and that, for him, is an advantage in this position. The game continued. Queen to g4, bishop to c8, then Kasparov played queen to a4, impressive depth of calculation. And he also comments, his idea here is to play knight to g5 and create mating threats, mating themes on the h7 square. He even mentions that if Karpov had played the move king to g8, which wasn't the move played in the game, he would play king to d2 here. And you might be wondering, but why, Raphael? Why king to h2? King to h2 is another very subtle move here, okay? Kasparov's idea is that he wants to play knight to g5 with ideas of checkmate on h7, without black having an intermediate move like rook to h1 check. So he moves the king, and now he's telling Karpov that the idea of knight to g5 and queen to h7 mate is unstoppable. What are you going to do?
King to a2, very strong move. An important move, Now my knight can go because the rook is hanging without check. Queen to e5, knight to g5, king to f6. Queen to f5, rook to e8. I now have only 5 attacking pieces, but just 3 defenses left.
So in this position, Karpov didn't play the king here because he would end up in this lost position. And he kept playing here with the move rook to 6. Kasparov played nxh6, capturing the rook. After gxh6, he moved k2, bringing the same idea. Kasparov comments that he wants to leave his knight on e4 free to jump, without the rook being captured here with a check, right? So it's a very refined move. Karpov continues here with the move pawn to e5, now pinning the rook on g3, and the game goes on with knight to g5, and oops! Look at that, the rook is absolutely being given up. The pawn can't capture because it's pinned, And in this position, Karpov played the move pawn to f6, okay? But Rafael Zinho, why didn't he just take the rook? As Kasparov showed, here there would be knight to f7 and checkmate in a single move, and the game would be over. The king is trapped, with the h7 square covered and the rook controlling the g-file, leading to an immediate end of the game. So after the super strong and aggressive knight to e5 by Garry Kasparov, queen to f6 is Karpov's choice. The game resumes with the move rook to e8. And Kasparov analyzes that in this position he has many, many pieces attacking the black king and that there's no way to defend against this. Basically, Kasparov would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces attacking here, while black would have 1, 2, 3 pieces defending. And now, how do you play this position?
And, for instance, any move, bb7 here, then it says I have the same combination, but with n8. Immediately, he made the only move just to avoid the mate. And I play this fantastic move, queen takes h6. It's remarkable to see king sacrifices in a world championship game. Yes, that's true. King takes g6, king takes e7. And here's an unforgettable mistake he should have taken with 0. Yes, I know, but I don't want him to take all your pieces off the board, because after rook takes g6, you would have taken
Him.
just for taking the rook.
Yes.
This is short. Knight e7, then I took only 7, bishop takes 7, and rook g-mate. And rook here, checkmate, because no square for the king, and it is mated with the bishop. Yeah, I'm fortunate. This bishop, okay, I took. With his queen, bishop, I think the rest is... Okay, I have an extra, so...
In this position, as you saw in the analysis, Karpov kept playing here with the move bishop to f5. It's already a bit of a desperate move because one of Karpov's ideas is to at least limit a little this super bishop here on b1, which ended up being the big difference at the end of the game. Before analyzing this line, Kasparov comments on the variation with the bishop moving to b7 to exchange the rooks. But he says that here there would be a very, very beautiful, very strong line, which I dare say not even Stockfish on its best days would find, which is the brilliant queen takes h6, sacrificing the queen for checkmate here in this position. Notice that the bishop can't capture because it's pinned by the rook on e8. And if queen takes h6 is played, then knight to f7 is checkmate with tomatoes. Very, very brilliant. A masterpiece. That checkmate from our line doesn't work anymore, right? After rook to e8, bishop to c7 doesn't work. Bishop f5 is Karpov's choice, and the game continued here with the move queen takes h6 just the same. A very beautiful move. Again, here in this position, the bishop here can't capture because it's pinned by the rook. There's a rook falling here on the 8th square. But there's no time to capture. You have to play now the move queen takes h6. That was Karpov's move. Knight to f7, played by Kasparov. King to h7, and now bishop takes f5, and there it is. The king is absolutely trapped. The move queen to g6 is forced here. And then this move, it's even a funny moment here because Kasparov comments, right, that here he ended up making a mistake. A mistake, right? He played bishop takes g6, which isn't the strongest move in this position. But, of course, it's still a winning move. He comments that the strongest move here would be rook takes g6. And here, it leads to a very funny position, too. Why? Because there's a rook falling here on e8, but notice that any square, the rook moves to here. The king is getting checkmated. The king is absolutely trapped. For example, if you play the move knight to d2, then rook to g3 is checkmate. The king is trapped with no defense. An interesting continuation is knight to 4, attacking the rook. If the rook moves back, the king remains trapped. Knight to g3 is forced, followed by rook takes g6. This leads to the same position where the rook moves out, threatening checkmate. So it just goes around a bit, but it falls into the same checkmate theme. So it's a very, very beautiful position. Also very difficult, right? But after the queen move, g6 Kasparov played here, bishop takes g6. Well, Karpov then played the move king to g7. Rook takes a8, bishop to e7 here. Kasparov already has a lot more material. He still continued with the move rook b8 to a5 defending, giving more support to the knight. Bishop to e4 with a discovered check. But Rafael, a knight is hanging. Yes, Karpov took that knight, and after the move bishop takes d5, the Russian Karpov resigned this brilliant and genius game. Why did he resign? White has a significant material advantage. Threatening knight takes d5 and rook takes b2. Kasparov's rook b5 threat will win even more pawns in addition to the extra pawns White already has. And notice the moment of resignation.
Karpov resigns. An incredible game by Garry Kasparov.
So there you have it, folks. A little bit for you, all of the great genius of Garry Kasparov playing against Karpov in the 1990 World Championship, with Garry Kasparov's own analysis. I saw this video on a foreign channel, Gotham Chess, and I copied the video format, bringing it here to Brazil so everyone can also have access to this incredible information. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button down below and see you in the next videos.